the unspoken wish. The evening was quiet, the kind of silence that felt soft instead of empty. Keanu Reeves sat on a wooden bench outside his home, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and gold, fading gently into the darker blue of night. There was peace around him, yet inside his chest, something heavy lingered. For years, people had admired him for his calm, his humility, his kindness. He was loved for his roles on screen, respected for his gentle presence off it. But few knew the truth he carried. Behind every smile was a man who had learned to live with loss, who had walked through nights of silence that stretched too long. That night, his closest friends had gathered for dinner. Laughter filled the room, stories circled the table, and everyone seemed light. Alexandra Grant sat among them, her laughter soft but bright, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the moment. She had always been more than a friend. She was a soul who understood his silences, who never demanded words when they were too heavy to carry. As the night wore on, the group drifted away, leaving only Keanu and Alexandra. The house grew quiet again, save for the soft hum of the city outside. She poured 2 cups of tea and placed one gently in front of him. "You were quiet tonight," she said, her voice calm, not accusing. He looked at her for a long moment, then lowered his eyes. "I've been thinking," he admitted softly. "Thinking about something I never really say out loud." She leaned forward slightly, listening with the patience she always gave him. "Then say it now," she encouraged. "Sometimes silence becomes too heavy when it has no voice." He hesitated, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "People think I'm content being alone. They see me walking quietly and they assume I have everything I need. But the truth is," his voice trembled slightly, though he steadied it, "my heart still wishes for something I never speak of. I wish for a wife, not for the sake of titles, not for image, but for the soul of it. I wish for someone to walk with me when the cameras are gone, someone who sees me not as an actor, not as a symbol, but simply as a man." His words fell into the room like a soft weight, deep and honest. Alexandra blinked, her chest tightening at the tenderness of his confession. He had spoken not with drama, but with truth, and it moved her. Keanu continued, his voice quiet, almost breaking. "I wish for a home that isn't just walls but warmth. I wish for laughter that doesn't fade when the night ends. I wish to hold someone's hand and know I will not wake up and find it gone." It sounds simple, maybe even ordinary, but to me it feels like the greatest wish of all. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was full of honesty, full of something rare. Alexandra's eyes softened, shimmering with emotion. She placed her hand gently over his, her voice low and steady. "Keanu," she whispered, "you call it ordinary, but it is the most extraordinary wish of all. Because you do not ask for glory, you do not ask for more fame, you do not ask for riches. You ask for love, for partnership, for truth. That is the kind of wish that melts the hardest of hearts." His eyes lifted to hers, surprised by the warmth in her tone. She smiled faintly, tears glistening but not falling. "And you know something? The way you love, with humility, with respect, with kindness. Any woman who receives that would never feel ordinary. She would feel chosen. She would feel safe. She would feel at home." Keanu's breath caught, his chest tightening with emotions he rarely allowed himself to feel. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Alexandra's hand stayed on his, steady and kind. "Sometimes wishes come true," she said softly. "Not because we chase them, but because we finally speak them into the world." The night deepened, the stars breaking through the sky above them, and in that quiet moment, 2 hearts carried words that could no longer be hidden. The fragile silence, the stars glowed brighter as night deepened, scattered like small lanterns across the sky. The air was cool, carrying the faint hum of the city in the distance. Keanu sat still, Alexandra's hand resting gently over his, her words still echoing in his mind. His chest ached in a way that was not pain but release. For years, he had buried his wish beneath layers of silence, afraid to name it, afraid it would sound foolish or fragile. Now that he had spoken it, he felt lighter, yet more exposed. Alexandra's eyes never left his. She could see the vulnerability in him, the honesty that most never witnessed. "You've carried this alone for too long," she said softly. "No one should carry such a tender wish in silence." Keanu exhaled slowly, shaking his head faintly. Silence felt safer. When you speak a wish, you risk disappointment. You risk people laughing, or worse, pitying you. I didn't want that. Her lips curved into a sad smile. You fear being misunderstood. But what you forget is how many people would understand. So many carry the same longing, to be seen, to be loved, to belong. There's no shame in wanting that. There's courage in admitting it. He studied her face, the calm way she spoke, the kindness in her eyes. For a moment he felt the world soften around them. Then his voice lowered, carrying the heaviness of memory. There was a time I thought I had it. Love, laughter, a future. But life has a way of taking as much as it gives. Every time I think about wishing again, I remember what I lost. I remember how fragile it all is. The pain in his voice was quiet, but deep, and Alexandra felt it cut through her own chest. She knew his story, the grief he carried, the losses that had carved the selves into his soul. She reached across the table and held his other hand, both of hers wrapped gently around his. "Fragility doesn't mean it isn't worth it," she whispered. "A flower is fragile, but it still blooms. A moment is fragile, but it still shines. Love is fragile, Keanu. But that's what makes it beautiful." His eyes glistened, though he blinked the tears away. "You always make things sound so simple," he said quietly, almost with wonder. "Not simple," she replied gently. "Just true." The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't heavy, and it wasn't fragile. It was full, like the stillness after rain when the earth feels alive again. Then Alexandra leaned back slightly, her gaze lifting toward the stars. "Do you know what I think?" she asked softly. Keanu tilted his head. "What?" She smiled faintly. "I think the universe listens to wishes like yours. The ones born not from pride, but from humility. I think it hears them, even when you whisper them to yourself in the dark. And maybe it waits for the moment you're ready to receive what you asked for." He looked at her, his breath caught. There was something in her voice, in her expression, that felt more than friendship, more than comfort. It was as if her words carried a meaning hidden between the lines. His heart trembled, unsure if he dared believe it. She met his gaze, her voice soft but unwavering. "You deserve to be loved that way, Keanu. Not because of what you've done, not because of who the world thinks you are, but because you are a man who gives respect, who lives with humility, who carries kindness even when the world is cruel. Any woman would be honored to walk beside that." He swallowed hard, his chest tight. Her words felt like balm to wounds he had long stopped tending. For the first time that night, he allowed himself a small smile, fragile but real. "Then, thank you," he whispered. "I didn't know how much I needed to hear that." Alexandra squeezed his hands gently. "Sometimes the heart already knows what it needs. It just waits for someone to say it out loud." The night stretched on, the stars above unblinking, as if listening. And in that fragile silence, a wish spoken and a reply given began to weave something new, something stronger than fear, something warmer than loneliness. The unspoken answer: the night had grown quieter, the streets beyond the garden nearly empty. Alexandra and Keanu sat together at the table, their tea long gone cold. The silence between them was not uncomfortable but charged, like the air just before rain. Keanu's mind drifted as he stared at his hands resting in hers. He had always been careful with words, careful with feelings. Life had taught him that carelessness could break hearts, and he had never wanted to wound anyone, especially her. But now, after speaking his wish aloud, after hearing her reply, he felt something stirring that he could no longer ignore. Alexandra broke the silence softly. "You've spent so much of your life giving to others," she said. "Your time, your kindness, your respect. But when was the last time you let someone give to you?" His brows lifted slightly. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've gotten used to carrying things alone. Maybe too used to it." She nodded slowly. "Carrying things alone makes you strong, but it also makes you weary. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone else share the weight." Her words pierced through him. He looked at her, and for a moment, he wanted to speak the truth blooming in his chest, that the person he wanted to share the weight with was her. But the words caught in his throat, tangled with fear. Instead, he asked gently, "And what about you, Alexandra? You listen to everyone's stories, you carry everyone's silence. But what do you wish for when the world grows quiet?" Her eye softened, and for the first time her gaze wavered. She looked down at their joined hands, her voice almost a whisper. "I wish for someone who sees me. Not just as an artist, not just as a friend, but as a woman. Someone who doesn't ask me to change who I am, but finds beauty in the way I already exist." His heart clenched. He wanted to tell her then that he saw her, that he had always seen her, the way she carried light into his darkest days, the way her voice could ease storms inside him, the way her presence felt like home even when he had no place to call one. But before he could speak, she lifted her head again, her eyes shimmering. "And do you know something, Keanu? When you said you wished for a wife, I didn't hear loneliness in your voice. I heard love, a love you've been holding, waiting to give. And that is what melted my heart." He froze. Her words struck him deep, almost too deep. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. She smiled faintly, though her own voice wavered. "I don't know if you meant to, but when you said it, it felt like you weren't speaking to the world. You were speaking to me." His breath caught, his chest rising with the weight of everything unsaid. "Maybe I was," he whispered. The admission hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. Alexandra blinked, her lips parting, her heart thundering. The moment was broken by the distant rumble of thunder. Clouds had gathered, and the wind began to stir through the garden. The air cooled, carrying the scent of rain. Alexandra glanced up at the sky, then back at him. "It's going to rain." Keanu smiled softly. "Then let it." And as the first drops began to fall, they stayed where they were, hands still joined. The storm outside only made the silence between them feel more intimate, more alive, but deep inside, both knew this night was only the beginning. A wish had been spoken, an answer given, and now the truth that had lived quietly in their hearts was ready to be faced. The rain that revealed, the rain fell harder, tapping against the windows and filling the night with its rhythm. Alexandra and Keanu sat still at the table, their hands joined, neither willing to break the fragile bond between them. The storm outside seemed to echo the storm inside, unspoken words pressing to be heard, emotions too heavy to stay hidden. Alexandra looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "Do you regret saying it?" she asked softly. Keanu tilted his head slightly, his dark hair falling across his forehead. "No," he whispered. "I regret waiting so long to say it. I regret living as if wishes weren't allowed to belong to me." His honesty tightened something in her chest. She wanted to speak, to answer with equal truth, but her voice caught in her throat. So she let the silence linger, her eyes holding his, hoping he would understand what her words could not yet say. Then a sudden flash of lightning filled the sky, followed by the deep growl of thunder. The lights in the house flickered, then went out. The room plunged into darkness, save for the pale silver glow of the storm outside. Alexandra gasped softly. "The power's gone." Keanu's calm voice reached her through the dark. Sometimes it takes losing light to see what really matters. His words wrapped around her like a blanket. She could barely make out his outline, but she could feel his presence, strong and steady beside her. The rain poured harder, and in that moment, it felt as though the world itself was pausing to give them space. She whispered, "When you said you wished for a wife, it felt like you were opening a door you kept locked for years." "I was," he admitted, "and when I opened it, I realized something. I don't want just anyone to walk through that door. I want someone who sees me, not the image, not the roles, not the man people think they know. Someone who sees my scars and doesn't turn away." Her breath trembled, but she found the courage to answer. "And what if the person you're wishing for has been sitting beside you all along?" His chest tightened. He leaned forward slightly, his voice almost breaking. "Then I would say that wish already came true, the moment I let myself see it." The words struck her deeply, and for a moment, the storm outside faded into silence in her mind. She could only hear the steady beat of her heart, the warmth in his voice, the truth she had long suspected but never dared to believe. Her hand tightened around his. "Keanu," she whispered, "you speak of scars, but what I see is strength. You speak of loss, but what I see is love. You've carried so much pain, yet you've never let it make you bitter. Instead, you became gentler, kinder. Do you know how rare that is?" His eyes glistened, though the shadows of the room tried to hide it. "I don't feel rare," he said softly. "I only feel grateful. Grateful that tonight I finally spoke the truth, and grateful that you were the one to hear it." Alexandra's heart swelled, her own tears falling silently. "And I am grateful that you trusted me with it, because I've carried my own silence too. I've wished for someone who would see me without asking me to change, someone whose kindness could hold my fears without breaking them. And now, hearing your words, it feels like my wish was waiting for yours." The storm raged outside, thunder rolling across the sky. But in that darkened room, they felt something steady, unshaken. For the first time, Keanu let his guard fall completely. He whispered, "Then maybe we've both been wishing for the same thing all along." Her reply came soft, but filled with certainty. "Yes. And maybe the storm tonight is just the world's way of saying it's time to stop hiding." Their eyes met in the dim light, and in that fragile moment, they both knew the truth could no longer remain unspoken. The truth in the storm outside roared louder, rain crashing against the glass, thunder rolling through the night sky. Yet inside the darkened room, Keanu and Alexandra sat close, their hands still joined, their hearts beating in a rhythm louder than the storm itself. Keanu's voice was low, steady, though it trembled with the weight of honesty. "For so long I told myself I was fine, that being alone was easier, safer. But the truth is, it was only fear. Fear of losing again. Fear of giving my heart and watching it break." Alexandra listened quietly, her eyes glistening in the dim light. His words weren't just confessions. They were pieces of himself, fragile pieces he had guarded for years. "When I said I wished for a wife," Keanu continued, "it wasn't about filling an empty space. It was about sharing the journey. I've lived long enough to know the difference between loneliness and solitude. I chose solitude to protect myself, but deep down, I was always lonely. I just didn't admit it until now." Alexandra's hand tightened around his. "Loneliness is heavy," she whispered. "I know that weight too. I've carried it when rooms were full, when people smiled but never truly saw me. But Keanu," she paused, her voice soft but steady, "you've never been invisible to me. I've always seen you, even in your silences, even in your shadows." His chest tightened, her words sinking deep. He turned toward her, the silver of the storm outlining her face. "And I've seen you, Alexandra. not as the world labels you, not as an image, but as the soul you are. Kind, strong, unafraid to carry light even when it costs you. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't hide it. "So maybe we've both been waiting," she whispered, "waiting for the courage to admit that what we wished for was each other." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm seemed to quiet around them, as if the world itself leaned closer to hear. Then Keanu whispered, "You've always been my answer, Alexandra. I just didn't have the courage to say it until now." Her breath caught, her heart pounding. "And you've always been mine." The confession hung between them, raw and tender. Their silence now was not empty. It was full, alive with a truth that had waited years to be spoken. Keanu reached up, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face, his touch gentle. "Do you realize what this means?" he asked softly. She smiled faintly through her tears. "It means wishes don't always stay wishes. Sometimes they become home." His lips curved into the smallest, most fragile smile. "Then maybe tonight is the night we stop wishing and start living." Alexandra nodded, her hand still clutching his, her tears now soft with relief instead of pain. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's stop hiding." A sudden knock at the door startled them. They froze, glancing toward the sound. The storm had masked the noise until now, but someone was there. Keanu stood slowly, his calm returning as he moved toward the door. Alexandra's heart raced. When he opened it, a delivery man stood soaked in the rain, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. "Sorry to disturb," the man said, handing it over. "This was left outside earlier. Must have gotten forgotten in the storm." Keanu thanked him and closed the door, placing the box on the table. Alexandra frowned, curious. Together, they unwrapped it. Inside was a book, its cover worn, its pages yellowed with time. Tucked inside was a note written in neat handwriting. "Wishes spoken aloud have power. Guard them, but do not fear them. They lead you to the truth you were meant to find." Alexandra's eyes widened. Who would send this? Keanu looked at the book thoughtfully, then smiled faintly. "Maybe someone who knew we were ready." The storm outside began into ease, the thunder fading into distant rumbles. And in that quiet, Alexandra leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. "Then let's be ready for whatever comes next." Keanu rested his hand over hers, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "Together," he said softly. "Always together." Alexandra's reply, the storm outside had faded into a soft drizzle, the sound of raindrops gentle against the windows. The room was still lit only by the silver glow of the night sky, but inside, Keanu and Alexandra felt a warmth brighter than any lamp could bring. The old book with the mysterious note sat on the table between them. Alexandra touched its worn cover with her fingertips. "Wishes spoken aloud have power," she repeated softly. "Maybe this is a reminder that tonight wasn't an accident." Keanu nodded, his voice low. "Maybe it was time. Maybe the universe was waiting for me to stop hiding behind silence." Alexandra lifted her gaze to his, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "And now that you've spoken it, what will you do with that wish?" He hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing against his chest. Then he answered, honest and steady. "I will protect it. I will cherish it. And if you'll allow it, Alexandra, I will share it with you." Her breath caught. Her heart pounded with a force that nearly stole her words. But instead of fear, she felt clarity, like the storm had washed away all the doubts she once carried. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you don't need to wish anymore, because the answer you've been waiting for is already here." His chest tightened, his eyes locking onto hers. "What do you mean?" he asked softly. She leaned closer, her hands trembling as they wrapped around his. "You wished for a wife who sees you, not the image, not the actor, but the man. I see you, Keanu. I always have. And if your wish is to walk this life with someone who will hold your hand through storms and stand by your side through silence, then my answer is yes. 1,000 times. Yes. Her words melted through the air, tender yet strong, each one settling deep into him. Keanu's breath shook, his composure finally breaking as tears glistened in his eyes. Alexandra, he whispered, his voice raw. You don't know what this means to me. She shook her head softly, smiling through her tears. I do, because it means the same to me. You were my wish too, even when I didn't dare to speak it. The silence that followed was alive with emotion. The rain tapped gently outside, the storm now only a memory. Keanu pulled her gently into his arms, holding her close, his voice steady in her ear. Then, tonight, let's make a promise. No more hiding, no more silence. Only truth, only kindness, only us. She closed her eyes, leaning into him, her reply steady and sure. Yes, only us. For the first time in years, Keanu felt complete. Not because he had spoken his wish, but because it had been met with a reply that carried love, trust, and truth. Alexandra's words had melted every wall he had built, leaving only the man he truly was, and the woman who had chosen him for exactly that. The storm had ended, but what remained was stronger than the rain, brighter than the stars. It was love, gentle, humble, unshaken, and as the night gave way to dawn, two hearts that had once walked in silence now walked together, no longer wishing, but living the answer they had both been waiting for.